Tim Cook just stepped down as CEO of Apple today. He may have just pulled off the most perfectly timed exit in CEO history. So he took over from Steve Jobs when everyone said that the company was cooked. He turned a $350 billion company into a $4 trillion one. And then he just walked out the door at peak valuation right before Tim had to answer for why Apple, the company that won't even let you use a non-Apple charger, is now running the AI from Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, and inside Siri. Here is the Tim Cook story broken down. When Steve Jobs died in October 2011, 6 weeks after handing Cook the CEO title, the tech industry assumed that Apple was finished as an innovating company. Cook was the opposite of Jobs in almost every way that seemed to matter. He was quiet, where Jobs was electric. He was operational, where Jobs was visionary. He was the anti-Jobs, a supply chain guy from Alabama who spent 12 years at IBM. He wasn't the product person. He was the plain vanilla guy who made products show up on time. Then what Cook did with that job was to make Apple boring on purpose. He didn't try to be the next Steve Jobs. He turned Apple into a revenue-generating machine. Revenue went from $108 billion to $416 billion. Just like he made products show up on time, he made money show up. Market cap went from $350 billion to $4 trillion. That is, check my math, 1,000% return. He launched the Apple Watch, AirPods, Apple TV Plus, and he turned services into a $109 billion annual business, bigger than most Fortune 500 companies on its own. Say what you will about Tim Cook, he ran the company through a pandemic, a trade war with China, and tariff chaos twice. Whether or not you like the new colors of the iPhones is a different story. He made Apple the most profitable, boring company in history. He did all of that while everyone else spent 15 years writing the same article. Tim Cook is no Steve Jobs. He wasn't Steve Jobs. He didn't wear turtlenecks. He wasn't trying to reinvent the iPhone. But he was the person who turned everything that Steve Jobs invented into something that could survive without Steve Jobs. He consolidated. That is a different skill and might even be a harder one. But Apple missed out on AI, which is kind of like missing the gold rush when you're already in California. Cook stood on stage in September 2024 and he promised that Apple Intelligence was coming. The market believed him. Then the iPhone 17 launched last September with barely an AI feature. Milestone after milestone kept passing. AI kept passing Apple by. The operating system updates still hasn't fully delivered on AI. Key researchers have left. And then earlier this year, Apple did something that it almost never does, which is it went to a competitor. It signed a multi-year deal with Google to let Gemini power Siri. Apple, which is the company that spent 2 decades building the most closed ecosystem in technology, notorious gatekeeper, they are now running a competitor's AI as the brain of its own assistant. That's a pretty major concession coming from them. I'm going to tell you about the new guys, so just wait a second. But note the timing. Cook downplayed retirement rumors literally last month when he told Good Morning America, I can't imagine life without Apple. I guess he meant that he's never going to switch to an Android, because today he's leaving at a $4 trillion valuation before the AI problem becomes his problem. As executive chairman, he gets to keep the job he's actually best at, which is working with governments, minding tariffs, the EU, China manufacturing, all that good, boring stuff that an IBM guy can tackle. He's giving up the product job and he's keeping the geopolitics job. That split tells you everything about where Apple thinks its real problems are. So they're bringing in some fresh, new talent. John Ternus, he's 51, a mechanical engineer from Penn. He joined Apple in 2001, meaning that he actually worked under Steve Jobs. So he's the last member of the executive team who built products in the Jobs era. And that's not an accident. Apple chose a guy who remembers what the company actually felt like before it became an operations machine, when they were truly still thinking different. Either way, we're about to see how John Ternus will answer the AI question. The big question that Tim Cook did not want to answer, which may define the next decade or more of Apple's legacy. For what it's worth, the stock barely moved on the announcement. After hours, Apple slipped less than 1%. So the man who ran the most valuable company on earth for 15 years stepped aside, and the market essentially said, we expected that. It's kind of a tell. Cook built Apple into a machine that was so stable, even losing the person who built it up like that doesn't break it. But John Ternus starts his new post on September 1st. So I guess we will check back in then and watch the charts.